Hello, welcome to the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast. I'm Jeff Cranston. Continuing with the theme, began last week when I talked to Brian Travis, project manager in MDOT's metro region, about the 696 project upcoming there and some other major work going on. I wanted to do the same thing with MDOT's Grand region, which is based in Grand Rapids and covers several adjoining counties. So I spoke with Art Green, who is a veteran of the Michigan Department of Transportation and is the Transportation Service Center manager in Grand Rapids, meaning that he oversees Kent and adjoining counties. So one of the reasons I wanted to talk to Art was because of a couple of grants that were announced by the Federal Highway Administration recently. One of those is a $25 million grant to help replace the bridge on the East Belt Line at the interchange with I-196 and I-96 east of the city of Grand Rapids. Very important bridge, carries a heck of a lot of traffic, important to commuters and certainly to commercial traffic and freight movement. And it'll make a major difference because of some connectivity that they're going to be able to enhance. There are trail networks both to the north and south of that bridge, and the new bridge will accommodate connections for those trails for non-motorized users. So Art had a lot of interesting things to say about that. And we also talked a little bit about what it's like to manage the system during winter in the Grand Rapids area, which gets a lot of lake effect snow and this incredible cold snap that we've had the past few days this week. And Art has a lot of experience with this and has an interesting take because he is a native of the Upper Peninsula and talks eloquently about what it means to try to manage the maintenance during these kinds of extreme cold events when salt loses its effectiveness and all the reasons for that. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. So again, Art Green, Transportation Service Manager in Grand Rapids. I've known Art a long time. He's had a couple of different jobs in the Grand region. He's been in the Grand region Muskegon TSC and now in the Grand Rapids TSC. Art, thanks for taking time to do this. And before we plunge into some really important and interesting topics, talk a little bit about your background and how you came to MDOT and your time there. I know you're a native Youper, so you certainly know what winter's like.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for having me on today. Really appreciate the opportunity for sure. I mean, my background with the department, starts way back when I was actually going to college at Michigan Tech and spent my summers then called in a co-op program. Working in District 1 and 2 in the UP, which was, kind of split up the eastern and western half of the Upper Peninsula there. And worked in both of those districts in my time as an intern there. And then, after college, it just so happened that the department wasn't hiring, and I spent about 5 years in a private firm here in Grand Rapids before moving into the region office, then District 5. At the very tail end of that, when TSCs were just starting to be formed, Transportation Service Centers for the department. And then I spent the last 27 years here in the Grand Region area with a small little stint for a couple years back now, at the central office as the engineer and design for the department and that opportunity. So I had a couple different roles within the Grand Region. I was one of the first cost and scheduling engineers that the region had. Delivered quite a few different projects in the Grand Rapids area over that time. Moved my way up to the TSC manager role throughout a number of years. First being a development manager in the Grand Rapids TSC, and then TSC manager after a time in that role, and then spent about 5 years in Muskegon TSC managing that, and now of course back here at the Grand Rapids TSC managing the office here. So that's kind of my background.
I kind of feel like everybody who moves up in the ranks, whether it's MDOT or any other state DOT, would benefit from a period of time in a transportation service center. It seems like it's like when you get to that level, it's really not about engineering anymore. It's a lot of public relations. It's a lot of relationship building and building trust and being responsive to the public, to lawmakers, certainly helping with the media relations as the media relations reps work with you on those things. I sense that you'd probably agree.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You take every experience, and that all adds to the mix. My years of spent in the development arena, developing jobs, as a kind of a design unit leader here in the TSC when we had those and different forms of the department, really taught me a lot about that relationship and developing projects and having the context of what you're trying to deliver and make that a human connection. You're talking to folks that don't know a lot about transportation and all the things that we have to manage financially, as well as with standards and safety and those types of things, and getting it over to them in that layman's terms, 8th grade reader level, and taking that experience you have in the design arena and putting that to practice, both in the field from the construction side and relating that to the customer, the public, certainly local officials, as well as your state representatives and senators and that types of thing is really important, because they're the ones that are going to promote the need for the project and the work, but also hopefully become an advocate for the project and the good work that we do in transportation.
Tell me this before we get into some other things. How do you explain to people who always say, I mean, we've been in it's a frequent theme on the podcast that Michigan has been in a decades-long period of underfunding transportation infrastructure, especially roads and bridges. Well, really everything. And people will say, I know, but I need you to do this one thing. And you get that all the time, right? So how do you deal with that? How do you process that?
We can put it in context of, your home, the age-old message about, fixing the roof, to make sure you save your infrastructure down below. We always, try to look at this thing and rely, at least over here on this side of the state, rely on our assets. We've been blessed with a lot of different, things over in this side of the state when it comes to our soils, our topography, those types of things. We're also challenged with the idea that we get, a pretty steady snowfall and a lot of extremes when it comes to, managing the system. And we can't always, look at, our neighbor and say that, they should wait, so we always have to, look at the partnership part of it, and that is the one thing that, again, going through the development process, I've had the opportunity to be in our Metro Council and that type of thing, and actually sit in those meetings when we're making those critical decisions, what projects on local, MDOT, federal level get built and which ones need to wait or which ones need to look for different funding opportunities and partner. So the more we build the partnership in the local front, the more we have trust in each other that we're gonna get to these jobs and we're gonna do the things we need to do, the easier those conversations need to be. And when you build that type of trust and you build that type of network, when Joe Public is asking you those hard questions, you've got a lot of support, and you can say the things you need to about the work we're doing together and that we're going to get there. And this is a collaboration. This isn't just MDOT making a decision. This is the community choosing these types of things first, second, and third in order to benefit the whole system.
Well, I can tell you that you and the region staff, Eric Kind, the region engineer, and certainly Roger Safford before him get really high marks on that. I've heard it over the years from a couple of different mayors of Grand Rapids, and certainly City Planning Director Suzanne Schultz, who's now in the State Transportation Commission. They really talk about this being a model for collaboration and what needs to go on between the department and the various communities. But since you mentioned the soil, and without going too geologically deep here, I'm interested in this because I hear that a lot, that we know the southeast side of the state has different soil. Certainly UP has different soil where you came from. But it seems like a bit of a contradiction if there was a Sunday school song that said, the foolish man builds his house upon the sand. So why is sand, advantageous for building in some cases.
Oh, it helps so tremendously. The west side, we don't have all, sand. We do have our areas, but for the most part, we're a pretty sandy area. Obviously, close to Lake Michigan, we have a lot of beach, and that kind of, ripples, toward the city of Grand Rapids. And the advantageous part of that is that we don't have as much activity with freeze thaw. And the biggest reason there is we get rid of that water that falls from the sky or melts from the snow or any other precipitation that's going to dry up and blow away or absorb into the soil is taken away and put right back into the ground aquifer. In the groundwater table generally is going to respond differently in a granular type soil than it's going to in a heavy soil like the clays and the silts and those types of things that have a tendency to hold the water or run within the aquifer a little bit differently than the will in sand. So and that's the the Rebuilding Michigan program. I mean, just to talk about that, those funds that we're borrowing the money for to kind of invest in what's been deemed better fixes, and they truly are. In that we've been able to, with some strategic areas within the state and of course in West Michigan too, get to some projects where we've been habitually challenged with that water and not being able to get it off the road. And that reason is we're finally able to dig down, rebuild, and then provide the sand, the gravel, and that pavement top surface that's going to perform better with all that water transfer that we get from the various types of precipitation. And of course, with freeze thaw is a lot better than what was there. I mean, the age old, the older pavements, built in the 40s, 50s, and, and even in the 60s with the concrete surfaces that are out there have bridged a lot of that moisture transfer and had, a lot of, heavier soils in places where we see problems, today when we're not able to get to those things, which that Rebuilding Michigan program got us to that point of replacing and further, benefits that soil strata, difference that we have, over here in West Michigan.
I did not want to have to geek out about geology, but since you mentioned it and I knew that you would know it, and you explained it very well. So again, before I get into a couple of the grants that are going to pay big dividends for the Grand Rapids region and people that travel, and it's not just people in the Grand region. Obviously, when we start talking about 96 and 196 and the East Beltline, that's travelers from all over the place, all over the state, even other states. But real quickly, we were on a call with some congressional staff yesterday, and they were talking about the extreme cold and the roads. And you did a great job explaining in a way I've never heard before. I mean, we talk a lot, and it's all over our Facebook page about salt, and everybody thinks salt's the answer to everything, and we have to explain every year why it just isn't effective at certain temperatures. But you took it beyond that to talk about the challenges in that kind of extreme cold beyond the salt not working. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's been, like we said the other day, we haven't had a really long sustainable cold in a few years like we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks here. And will likely, it looks like maybe, get a little bit warmer here now and then probably dip down again and again. But the phenomenon that happens and was a challenge for our maintenance crews is like I say, I grew up in the north and in the UP, and honestly, I love that condition because when it got cold up there, it stayed cold for a long time, very predictable for the driver. The one thing up there was we didn't have the number of vehicles traveling on that surface that would send that instant glaze on the pavement. So when we get to rush hours and that type of thing down here, we got the sustained cold and we're not able to get all of the snow and things off the road. And even if we do, what's going on is with all those trips is there's a slight warming to that pavement surface that all those trips and all those cars that are coming in happen. Wind blows again, temperatures drop. You get instant glazing of that surface. So you could be looking at the black ice, you could be looking at the gray ice, the brown ice, the white ice. The common theme there is that some form of ice ends up happening because you get more of those trips and that little bit of warming of the surface that that we have to deal with. And of course, in the extreme cold temperatures, that's where you see our maintenance forces looking at more of a pure sand mix to just give friction back in those situations. And sometimes when the temperatures actually start to rise, that they're going to here probably in the next couple of days, you're going to see more salt added than maybe some of that sand mix, depending on the treatment, or just salt to try to get that ice pack off, or that removing that slick surface that all those tires, all those trips, and that's why you see sometimes our maintenance crews treating throughout the day, because they're seeing that flash freeze effect. There's certain corridors we have that are more windy, more wind tunnel effect, that we have to treat differently because of that phenomenon. In prepping for the next commuter set of hours, so we don't get a lot of crash activity and things, during the day when those things are being active in the cold temperatures.
So real quickly, because another question we get often is, why don't we use more sand, especially from people who are very environmentally conscious and concerned about salt? And, it's a whole nother conversation that MDOT has done a lot of really aggressive things to limit the use of salt, or at least wasted salt, the scatter. But talk about why there's only so much sand or gravel you can use, because that can present some drainage issues on its own, right?
Absolutely. We have a rotation. We have over, just in the small metro area of MDOT's network in Grand Rapids, we have over 1,500 different catch basins that we are going to be rotating and cleaning, just in our small little metro area here of MDOT system, not the local system, of course, but the MDOT system. And yes, the more sand salt mixture stuff, the more we're addressing our drainage facilities and trying to make sure that we're doing the best we can with environmental issues that we have with groundwater. And then, of course, that runoff that associates with that when it does start to rain, or they get the snow melt, or that type of thing. So we're always being conscious of balancing the safety with the condition, with the traffic, and the customer needs that are out there, trying to make sure that we balance all of those things together. And of course, yes, in the spring, extensive sweeping, extensive cleaning of the storm systems to get the most of that material out that we can, on a rotational basis. We're obviously not funded to do all of it all the time, but we're going to do that in a rotation that makes some sense and also balances the environmental quality of the water runoff.
All these things that those of us who drive on the roads just kind of take for granted, that's for sure.
Please stay tuned. We'll be back with more Talking Michigan Transportation right after this.
Michigan law requires drivers to maintain at least 200 feet behind a snowplow when crews are plowing or treating roads and have their lights on. This does not apply when passing the snowplow. In addition, stay at least 20 feet away when the plow is stopped or at an intersection. Failure to do so can result in a fine of $100. The law is meant to ensure snowplow operators have the proper space and time to clear the roads. This makes Michigan's roads and neighborhoods safer to drive on and walk around throughout the winter. Always remember, snowplows need room to groom.
Since you talked about balance before, we talk about the $25 million grant that's going to help rebuild a vital bridge on the East Belt Line, also known as M37 on the east side of Grand Rapids, where it crosses the two major east-west freeways coming into the city, I-96 and 196. Let's talk first about another grant, not quite as big, $800,000, to continue some planning on the 131 corridor through the city. And the reason I want to frame that in the context of balance is because there are so many people with so many strong feelings about what should happen to 131, largely elevated, including the S-curve. It's, something we've talked about a lot. When it was built in the early 60s, political leaders and business leaders at the time wanted the freeway to go right through the city. They thought that was progress. There were others, I think at the federal level especially, who didn't think that was the best idea, but that's what happened. So that's what we've got now. So you've been dealing with this for a long time and trying to explain the realities to people. How do you balance that?
Well, we with the studies that we've done, and of course this opportunity that we're very thankful for, with this opportunity to do some more planning in this northerly segment, a little bit out of the core downtown, but certainly a part of downtown by any extent. The issue is 131 in West Michigan does so many things. It's a commuter route, it's a long distance transfer route, it's a freight route, it's a local route for deliveries, it's a go get the groceries route for folks. It's feeding our events downtown as the city continues to grow. It's definitely an artery for that. The medical industry in Grand Rapids has taken off greatly and has become a very critical route for a destination for a lot of specialty services that we have in the medical community. And when we, are planning these projects out and looking at these things, we're balancing a lot, including the folks that live next to it and the folks that account on it for their businesses, the economy, what it means to the city and the growth and the economic opportunities that everybody will, eventually, and already take benefit from. We can't always look back at what, was built in those reasons. We need to look forward, and we need to look at, what is the current environment? What's the current short-term, mid-term, and long-term plans for the land use around the freeway? And what can we do with this freeway to sustain the economic viability, sustain the convenience and the efficiency of travel for all those different users, and still provide a facility that's going to be very conscious, to the folks that are going to live and operate their businesses next to it. So this grand opportunity is going to be able to allow us to do some more outreach, get more invested with our different modes of transportation that need to exist. When the freeway went through that particular section, kind of from, the 196 or Pearl Street area up to Richmond and, and including Leonard Street along the way in that corridor. When that freeway was put in, there was a very conscious effort to still maintain connection within the neighborhood community. A couple different pedestrian tunnels were built with the project. Now we know that didn't always solve the problem. We hear about those conversations all the time that type of connectivity isn't necessarily the highest quality. So when we look at this next section and we start, doing a very preliminary planning, and before we even talk about what can be designed and what we can do there, we need to think about the user, all of the different types of users, but more importantly, the original purpose for those tunnels and non-motorized or pedestrian crossings. What's the value there? What are the land use, development changes that are being considered, so we can look at, when we do put things back together, what's that quality we want to provide together? What trail network, what, reactivation of the riverfront is going to happen here, like as it has in different sections to the south of here, and how we can do this together as a community, considering all the different modes, and still have a 131 that does the things that it's doing today and even does them possibly even more efficient, because that's what's going to help the community and the neighborhood, have that best balance as well.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I framed it as an extension of what's already being talked about in what we really think of as where 131 goes through downtown. But that area north toward Ann Street has developed significantly, and what is the downtown, business area commerce has pushed that way. And like you said, what goes on with the rapids and being restored and what goes on with the river is a factor in that too. So I think it's great that connectivity can be part of that. So let's talk about the grant for the East Beltline major north-south corridor on the east side of Grand Rapids. Again, like you talked about with 131, lots of commuters, but also freight, a lot of commercial activity, major bridge over two other freeways. And it's needed replaced for some time, but the grant allows you to also add some of those connectivity elements that you're talking about in other places, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. The grant will really allow us to replace the facility that not only will take care of the asset condition challenge that we're having with the bridge and the huge utility that it is today. We need to take care of that component too. So we got a long-lasting asset. It'll also allow us to activate future planning needs. Since 2006, we've had an environmental and engineering study on the books that we're still working our way toward with the different funding challenges that we have to maintain our existing assets and some of the enhancements that study had suggested. This bridge replacement is going to allow the activation of those to really, come to fruition, putting the piers that are going to hold up the bridge in the right locations for those future improvements to happen with the interchange, 96 and then 196 coming together, as well as how the Beltline interacts with that, and the north-south, movements and access to 130 to the 196 and 96 corridor are going to be critical. The other big component of this grant is it's going to allow us to make a connection with non-motorized that really doesn't exist today. For the most part, the Beltline has had a shoulder and a kind of a non-motorized, separated, by curb only type facility along it to the south, from this area to the south. And to the north, the city and the township have built a pretty extensive trail network within the right of way and offer right of way in the different, county and city streets with the non-motorized pathway. This bridge replacement now will help us take another step with that, that kind of separated non-motorized facility and actually make a connection. Today, the bridge does not really have any type of non-motorized crossing on it or next to it. And the opportunity with this grant is to make that connection and connect the trails that are along Michigan, connect trails that are being planned along the Leffingwell area and Bradford Street area by the city of Grand Rapids, connect the trails that have already been built and be expanded on the Grand Rapids Township has, leading the Meyer Gardens and further to the north up toward, the Celebration Cinema and mall area and things that exist up towards Knapp Street. So very critical connection from a non-motorized standpoint, because number of opportunities for a non-motorized separated facility across I-96 and 196 is fairly limited today. And we want to do the best when we're investing in the infrastructure and making things more efficient for the vehicle centric. That, our challenge and our hope is that we're able to do that with a non-motorized way too, working with our local partners again to make sure that can be as robust as it needs to be, and kind of live out that we replaced the bridge. We're talking 75 or 100 years old before we're really replacing the structure again. So this is a big moment or a big decision to help us with a lot of different goals here.
Yeah, I think that connectivity, I know the Grand Rapids Township officials are really happy with what they've done with trails the last several years there. And certainly East Grand Rapids to the south has their own network. So being able to connect all of those is that'll be a wonderful thing. But there's going to be some pain in between. Talk about the project and how the East Beltline is going to have to be closed there for a while.
Yeah, preliminarily, we're looking at schedules for the work, just given the amount of use, the amount of challenge of replacing the structure. It's going to get quite a bit wider to accommodate some more lanes, some shoulders, and of course non-motorized as we talked about. So trying to maintain through movement on that bridge while we're doing that is going to become very difficult and push the schedule unfortunately into multiple seasons. So if we look at at least preliminary, if we look at at the idea of closing that through movement, also the north-south on the bridge would be shut off for the time that we're doing the construction, still allowing the ramp movements to access the freeway as they do today for the most part. We can get this into a one season replacement, it looks like. So we're going to keep planning, keep looking at that idea, keep trying to enhance that, make it better, keep working with our local partners because we're going to need their help in utilization of their system in order to make that a reality. And do a lot of communication, make sure that we, get out in front of the communities, get out in front of regionally, really, trucking, package delivery, schools, those types of things to make sure that plan can be successful.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of communication for sure. And there's already been, a lot of media reports about it. And the sad reality, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, is that when the project starts, a lot of people are going to say, I didn't know anything about this.
That does happen.
I think the last thing maybe is just talk about you're hoping to do all this in the 2027 construction season, right? Is that still the plan?
Yes. Yeah. With the grant opportunity, it's going to take us a little bit, to go through that process of, confirming all those things with the grant. And then we're well underway with the design. We have some, definitely some decisions to make. It's more partnering to do with the city, the township, and, surrounding regional area when it comes to, like we talked about, traffic control, final design type elements, looking at, some connectivity opportunities for, crossing over, the belt line with some of the non-motorized things. And we'll be ready to go for the 27 construction season. And that is important because we want to give our contractors enough time in advance to acquire materials, put together a good plan to stage and mobilize and make sure that we got a safe work zone and we've got a good message out there for folks to follow the traffic control we have in place and look at those different parts of detours that are going to be a part of the job.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you underscored the safety of the work zone. That's obviously going to be a huge priority. So really, anything else you want to say about that, or any of the other things you have going in the Grand Region, Art? I think we covered a lot.
We did cover a lot today, Jeff. I don't think we have much else. The 25 construction season is going to be very busy for us. We're going to be working on, some projects out in Ionia, and we have a big one, our design build job down to the south on 131 between 100th Street and 76. That's going to occupy a lot of our time and unfortunately inconvenience our customers a bit. But when it's done, we'll be able to have a brand new facility there, fully reconstructed and ready for service, for another good long time.
Yeah, well, you've got I think I'm more familiar with the Ionia work, obviously, for obvious reasons, but you've got a very good plan there, I think, a good mitigation plan for the morning and afternoon. So I'm excited to see how that works out, and probably I'll also be spending some time on Grand River Avenue. So that's just the way it goes. Thanks, Art. I really appreciate you taking time to do this, and good luck with all the work you've got.
Thanks, Jeff. Again, appreciate you having me, and appreciate the conversation.
I'd like to thank you once more for tuning in to Talking Michigan Transportation. You can find show notes and more on Apple Podcasts or Buzzsprout. I also want to acknowledge the talented people who help make this a reality each week, starting with Randy Devler, who skillfully edits the audio, Jesse Ball, who proofs the content, Courtney Bates, who posts the podcast to various platforms, and Jackie Salinas, who transcribes the audio to make it accessible to all.